Trump is officially the nominee. Biden is officially not. Kamala Harris is emerging as the Democrat hopeful, and we need to talk about every bit of this. What is the Christian perspective on all this news? Let's talk about it. I'm Blake Watson, and this is We the Free. One of the best ways you can help our show, other than by sharing today's episode, is by picking up some We the Free merch at wethefreeshow.com. You can be the salt and light you are meant to be by wearing the Salt and Light shirt, or by sipping your coffee from the Salt and Light mug, or hey, you can sport the God Bless America shirt, and of course the classic We the Free crest tee. We've even got stickers and a Smells Like Freedom candle. So check out our merch today at wethefreeshow.com. Pay very close attention to what is happening around you. You are living in one of the most consequential moments in history. I hope you all were able to watch or listen to our special episode on Saturday. I covered the attempted assassination on President Trump, the mass opposition to him for 8 years, and the spiritual undertones and the spiritual roots to explain everything that's happening politically and in the politics and geopolitics of it all. It was deep, but I promise if you'll focus on the substance of that episode, you won't find yourself confused by everything that's going on, and you won't be surprised by the events unfolding before our eyes today. In summary, the episode called The Shot Heard Round the World explains that everything in life is rooted in the spiritual dimension of reality. And for that reason, we all find ourselves in the middle of spiritual warfare, a fight between the forces of good and evil until the end of time. One of the main features of the end times described to us in the book of Revelation is that Satan empowers and authorizes a global empire and a one world system. It's no coincidence that the progressive powers that be today wish to demolish American dominance and sovereignty and our currency because it paves a perfect path to globalism. Donald Trump stands in the way of that politically, and you and I stand in the way of that spiritually. We covered some really interesting stuff in that hour of episode 41, so go back and take a listen. Last month, I mentioned something about how the news moves in waves, and that when the news is moving slow and not much is going on, it's actually a bad sign, not a good sign. Slow news means that we're about to get hit by a monsoon of news. Well, right now is one of those times. The news is coming, and it's coming almost too fast to process it all, but no worries. We're going to sift through it all and tell you what you need to know. The key word there is need. I'm not going to waste your time with tabloid items and fleeting circumstances. As I explained in episode 41, there is a spiritual rooting for everything pertaining to humanity and life on earth. Everything. At We the Free, we're going to sift the news through that spiritual mesh to give you the truth we desperately need. We're going to begin today by returning to the story of President Trump's would-be assassination. Listen, this story is leaking ever so slowly through the sieve of government and media. This will take years to get to the bottom of, so I don't want you to be disillusioned by the lack of information and clarity. I mean, we still don't know what happened to John F. Kennedy. Not fully, but whenever you have a powerful organization like the Heritage Foundation, who is external to both government and media, then you can get some valuable information. We've talked about the Heritage Foundation before, and I've cited them multiple times on the show. They're the same organization who gives a full freedom report card on every member of Congress. They're also the authors of the 2025 project, which we'll talk about very soon, I promise. But here's the news from them this week. They have a portion of their company called the Oversight Project, which seeks to provide government transparency to the public through constant FOIA requests, and they provide valuable research and information to our oversight committees, hence the name. They posted all of this in a thread on X this week. Assassination info drop. We found the assassin's connections through our in-depth analysis of mobile ad data to track movements of Crooks and his associates. They're talking about Thomas Crooks, President Trump's shooter. The Oversight Project at the Heritage Foundation tracked Crooks's cell phone data and the cell phone data of those apparently associated with Crooks. To do this, we tracked devices that regularly visited both Crooks's home and place of work and followed them. That's important. These are devices that regularly visited Matthew's home and place of employment. Now, take a look at this map that they posted. The Oversight Project stated, someone who regularly visited Crooks's home and work also visited a building in Washington, D.C., located in Gallery Place. Gallery Place is basically a shopping center. It's also a subway station. There's a movie theater there, and there's a sports arena across the street. But if you look closely at the map, it's only 2 blocks away from the headquarters for the Secret Service. What you cannot see from the map is that there are 3, I looked it up, 3 FBI offices within a 3-block radius of this cell phone pinpoint data, which was taken on June 26, 2023. So over a year ago. There's one on Pennsylvania Avenue, there's one on 4th Street, and there's one on 11th Street there. They also found a device linked to Crooks's workplace, which traveled to Butler, Pennsylvania, the place of the shooting, on July 4th and July 8th, about 1 week before the rally. Here's the image depicting that data. They also stated this device stopped all activity on July 12th, which was the day prior to the shooting. They also tracked Crooks to Allegheny Arms and Gun Works, a guns and ammo store in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, on August 30th of last year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and speculate and theorize, but as Michael Knowles says, the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth is only about 6 months. The conspiracy, all along, since the moment of the event, has been that this was an orchestrated attempt on Donald Trump's life. We talked about some of the oddities last week, the awaited response, the Secret Service's seemingly intentional neglect of the rooftop, etc. Now, the Secret Service director has resigned, but this information from the Heritage Foundation connecting Matthew Crooks to Washington, D.C. is at least highly concerning. Now, moving on to an important question. Did the Democrats just pull off another coup d'etat? In case you live under a rock, you've probably, and I would say very likely heard, that President Biden dropped out of the race for re-election. They posted a letter on X announcing this. Let me say that again. Joe Biden let the world know that he was stepping down on X, formerly known as Twitter, on a Sunday, on social media. Now, keep in mind, this is after weeks of pressure and calls and demands for him to step aside. But the Bidens refused. So what's with this sudden about face? Well, the White House, not Joe Biden, let everyone know on July 17th, so 8 days ago, that he had tested positive for COVID and would self-isolate at his home in Delaware. They also said he would continue to carry out his presidential duties fully during that time. Well, then 4 days later, the following letter was posted on X. Mind you, this is not on presidential letterhead, White House letterhead, and Joe Biden has never once signed his name like the signature you can see in the following photo. My fellow Americans, Over the last 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today, what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. And just to be clear, this wasn't posted as a written post on X. It was a scan of a letter, like a PDF. Now, with this image, Biden's account also posted separately. My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this. So let's just take a step back for a minute. All that we heard for 4 years was that Biden was strong, efficient, intelligent, and composed, and that he was healthy. And anyone that thinks he has any mental or cognitive issues is an idiot. Then the debate with Trump was on June 27th, which was only about a month ago. After the debate, Democrats, liberals, leftists, progressives, and the media collectively made an about face and turned on Joe Biden. Almost like it was coordinated. I don't know. Then the pressure was on. Biden needs to resign. Biden needs to let someone else run. Biden needs to this. Biden needs to that. But Joe and Jill said, we're not going anywhere. 16 days after the debate, Trump was nearly murdered. 4 days later, Biden announces his sickness. 4 days later, he steps down and endorses Kamala Harris in an unbelievably informal manner. Todd Starnes over at Newsmax said the following: his staff only found out once the message had been posted on X, and cabinet members were notified by the chief of staff, not Biden. How do we know Biden wrote that letter? And how do we know that Biden posted the letter on his X page? There was a window of 4 days between Biden's sick announcement and his dropping out of the race announcement. The really, really important and perplexing question is, what in the world happened in those 4 days that made the Bidens completely change their minds? Or was it something else? Charlie Kirk at Turning Point got a call from the Las Vegas Metro Police Department over the details that Biden's trip to Nevada on July 17th was abruptly concluded due to a medical emergency. So again, this was on Wednesday, July 17th, the day that Biden's X account posted he was sick and the White House claimed he had COVID. He was in Nevada. Here's what Charlie reported. The official story was that Joe Biden's trip was cut short last week due to COVID. However, according to this source, U.S. Secret Service informed LV Metro that there was an emergency situation involving Joe Biden and to close necessary streets so that POTUS could be transported immediately to University Medical, which they began to do in earnest. Then, mysteriously, there was a stand-down order and the United States Secret Service informed local Vegas PD that they were going to medevac POTUS to Johns Hopkins, which they presumed meant fly him back east ASAP. Apparently, the rumor mill in the police department was that Joe Biden was dying or possibly already dead. Other independent journalists caught on to this information as well, but I think Charlie is the most credible. Now, returning to the Todd Starnes piece on Biden's withdrawal, he said that Biden's brother, Frank Biden, told CBS News that health absolutely was the deciding factor in the decision. And then he told CBS, selfishly, I will have him back to enjoy whatever time he has left. Now, here's the Las Vegas NBC affiliate with the story.
Right now, we want to take you to UMC, the only level 1 trauma center in the entire state of Nevada, and they were more than ready to treat the president today if necessary.
News 3's Kristen Drummond joins us live with an interview that you'll only see here on 3.
Well, Dana and Marie, the response here, very swift. The hospital receiving an alert at around 2:15 this afternoon about a possible medical issue with the president not involving trauma. Of course, as we know, the president did not come here to UMC behind me, but team members were ready to go on high alert. From the medical staff along with law enforcement, we saw outside the trauma center this afternoon, just waiting in case the president did arrive. Now, we did see law enforcement appearing to secure the perimeter as well as bring in a dog. I spoke with CEO Mason Van Houweling less than an hour ago. He tells me the Level 1 Trauma Center is ready for these types of emergencies, including one that could be with the president. From working with law enforcement partners to their team members, Van Houweling tells me the hospital adjusted within minutes from trauma to a medical one, which means having imaging as well as lab procedures ready instead of surgeons, x-rays, and CTs. The hospital remained in contact with President Biden's security team with updates to make sure they were ready in case something else happened. But as we know, he did take off and left Las Vegas.
In summary, after 3 years of not only political decline, but cognitive decline, Biden is clearly in the advanced stages of cognitive disability, whether that be Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. I've talked about this before, but I've lost 2 beloved family members to this awful disease. At the end of this process, the brain literally starts to shut down, and so in turn does the body, the organs, because the brain is the control center. It is awful to watch this happen to those you love, but it's awful for all of us to witness this happening with the President of the United States. Yes, I do think the leftist response after the debate was coordinated because they knew Biden was toast. But no, I don't think this was a bloodless palace coup d'etat on Joe Biden. That's why they pleaded with him for weeks and weeks. They were respecting the leader of their party, despite his health. Well, I think an actual health scare happened with Joe when he was in Nevada. The White House covered it up, saying it was COVID, but the Bidens knew at that moment that it really was time to go. That's why James Biden said what he said. That's why Jill and Hunter and Ashley and all the Bidens haven't said a word. At least that's my take on all of this shrouded information. And I know that sounds like a glass half full sort of take on the situation, but just think about it. If some of the coup d'etat theories are true, as in Biden actually had COVID, and while he was in quarantine, they took the race away from him, only for him to just find out later, that is highly implausible given the Biden's family. Any of the theories involving the 25th Amendment, those theorists don't understand how the 25th Amendment works. That process, which has to be initiated by the vice president, would have gotten really ugly and would have done more harm than good for them. And I'm sure there are theories that Biden was poisoned or something similar, which I know seems like something they would actually try, especially given the proximity to Trump's near assassination. But again, if you're going to take a shot at the king, you best not miss. But, despite his digging in and resistance to the growing pressure, perhaps, and who knows if this is right, Joe Biden is trying to save his legacy. His polling numbers have only dropped and dropped and dropped for months and months. After every Trump trial and the debate and the assassination attempt and the RNC, Biden's polling numbers continued to plunge, which is a good sign for conservatism, but a bad sign for a man who only cares about his own legacy. The worst thing that Biden could ever do for his lasting legacy would be allowing the American people to vote him out of office. My name cannot be on this ticket because the numbers are increasingly demonstrating that I will lose this election and my legacy will be forever tarnished by the Vox Populi, which was evidenced by his braggadocious address to the nation on Thursday night. So it may be a combination of legacy and that Joe had a legitimate health scare that convinced him that it actually was in the best interest of the party for him to step aside for the election. Now, let me tell you how everyone knows Kamala Harris is the official candidate and why all of the Democrats are lining up behind her and why Joe Biden is endorsing her. It's really simple. Campaign finance laws. Earlier this month, the Biden campaign was holding on to about $240 million in campaign funds compared to Trump's $331 million. The only person that can legally accept those campaign funds is Kamala Harris. No other candidate can just step in and use the money that's been donated to the Biden-Harris campaign. If the vice president steps in as the candidate, they can form their own campaign committee. Then Biden's campaign committee can simply transfer the funds to Kamala Harris, which is, I'm sure, about to happen. So you can add that $240 million to the more than $80 million since the announcement. Now, sure, there's a legal process by which one campaign transfers their funds to another new candidate, but even that has some pretty severe limitations. However, all this goes without mentioning the ideological box that the Democrats have locked themselves into. Joe Biden was vocal and outspoken about his process of selecting Kamala Harris as his running mate in 2020. All that actually mattered was that she was a woman of color. That's it. But when conservatives today say that she was probably the biggest DEI hire of all time, we're slammed for it. That is the corner that they've backed themselves into. In this occasion, and in this new campaign, the word is intersectionality. But truthfully, it's more like a dead end. What were the Democrats and their leader, Joe Biden, going to do? Skip over and cast to the side the woman of color second in command? Of course they couldn't possibly do that. That would be sexist and misogynistic and racist. We must show everyone how virtuous we are. So for those reasons of ideology and campaign financing, Kamala was the only option. Now, here's what's going on now. The Democrats think they can pretend to be really excited about their new candidate and that if they show enough excitement and unanimous support, they will generate the momentum and force they need to retain the levers of power. But I don't think it's going to work. Here's Chuck Schumer making the announcement.
So now that the process is played out, from the grassroots bottom up, we are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm clapping. You don't have to.
Why the lack of enthusiasm right out of the gate? You see, this is why I call this a dead end. And the Democrats are so blinded by their lust for power, they don't even realize how stupid and politically ignorant this is. Just set aside Kamala's pre-federal government days. You know, how she got her start by being Willie Brown's mistress and Montel Williams' girlfriend, and became a prosecutor in California who didn't really punish criminals, and how she narrowly became the AG in California, where she had the same lax record with the exception of potheads and free labor prisoners. There's plenty of insanity to talk about there in her past and her history in the failed state of California. And we could talk about how ignorant and buffoonish she sounds every time she speaks. We could talk about how no one wants to work for her. But let's focus on her policies and behaviors as a senator and a vice president. This is why Chuck Schumer had a crowd of crickets. Her short stint as a senator was highlighted by two things: her atrocious voting record and the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. The Heritage Foundation gave Senator Harris a lifetime score. Are you ready for this? A lifetime score of 4%. That's 4 out of 100. Okay? That is the worst legislative rating I have ever seen. And again, that's a freedom rating. If you have 100%, then every single thing you vote on or every bill that you sponsor is conducive to liberty. So her having 4% means it's the opposite of liberty. It's tyrannical. It's stifling to freedom. But again, that's the worst legislative rating that I've ever seen. So just to name a few of the legislative items in her time in Congress, she voted in favor of the Udall Amendment, which prohibited defense funds from being used to attack the government of Iran and the armed forces of Iran. In other words, she defended the Iranian government. You know, the state sponsor of terror in the Middle East. She voted to impeach President Trump in February of 2020, which they, of course, failed at. And she also supported the $1.4 trillion omnibus bill and the $900 billion COVID package in December of 2020. Now, most of you are old enough to remember Joe Biden's shining moment as a senator from Delaware, the confirmation hearings for Justice Clarence Thomas. I'm telling you, if you want to get your blood boiling, go back and watch those hearings. They were racist and bigoted, and the committee, which again, Joe Biden was the chairman, concocted a fake scenario where Clarence Thomas had allegedly sexually assaulted a woman named Anita Hill. They marched her out and she recited a written and rehearsed story, and then they grilled Clarence Thomas over the fabricated claims. And for what reason? Because Thomas was an excellent conservative justice who came from absolutely nothing and just so happened to be black. Here's what Thomas had to say at the end of the hearing, for which Joe Biden was most responsible.
Committee will please come to order. Judge, it's a tough day and tough night for you, I know. Let me ask, do you have anything you'd like to say?
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
That was October 11th of 1991. Then in September of 2018, the Democrats rolled out the exact same playbook with Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. This time, however, one of the ringleaders was Senator Kamala Harris. She attacked his character. She propped up and praised and lauded the fabricated rape victim, Miss Ford. She posed left field, leftist gotcha questions. She made political statements in the form of questions as a scare tactic to rouse the radical leftist base. And this was ultimately Kavanaugh's response to all of that.
My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations. This confirmation process has become a national disgrace. I intend no ill will to Dr. Ford and her family. The other night, Ashley and my daughter Liza said their prayers, and little Liza, all of 10 years old, said to Ashley, we should pray for the woman. It's a lot of wisdom from a 10-year-old. We mean no ill will. I've never sexually assaulted Dr. Ford or anyone. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups. This is a circus.
Like master and apprentice, Senator Harris emulated almost the exact actions of then Senator Biden from nearly 30 years prior. But those are just the highlights of her time as a senator. It was only a few months after this circus hearing that Kamala announced she was running for president. Well, she was among the many who ran that year. 2020 saw a record number of Democratic candidates running for office. At its peak, there were 29 Democrats who officially declared. Senator Kamala Harris being one of them. And she ran her campaign like a typical radical Democrat from California. Medicare for all, criminal justice reform, decriminalization of marijuana, income inequality, raising minimum wage, environmental justice and the Green New Deal, LGBTQ plus rights, abortion rights, voting rights, gun control and banning assault weapons, and a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Now, just as a side note, Kamala Harris is a mixed race of Indian and Jamaican. She is not African American. She's played the race card for much of her career, but there was one particular moment when she used this incredible attack on Joe Biden. This was in the Democratic primaries, the first one in 2019. Watch what happened.
I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
Kamala was hailed as a star after this, and Joe Biden felt completely betrayed. Well, it didn't take long for Kamala to completely blow up the momentum of her campaign. She was not prepared to face criticism over her time as an attorney general or a prosecutor in California. Here was the beginning of the end, thanks to Hawaiian Representative Tulsi Gabbard.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Kamala's campaign would only devolve and diminish from there. And that's because she ran a terrible, terrible campaign. She was not coordinated enough. She was not ready to respond to criticism. They mismanaged funds, and she treated her staff like they were slaves or farm animals. That's why most of them quit their jobs, and the same thing happened as VP. So she officially dropped out of the race before primary voting on December 3rd, 2019. But as you know, a candidate's name can still appear on certain ballots in certain states. But so by the end of the primary season, where Joe Biden would ultimately become the nominee, Kamala Harris received an estimated total of 2,552 votes. Let me say that again. Kamala Harris got 2,552 primary votes to become the Democratic nominee. Well, Biden would become the presumptive nominee after Super Tuesday on March 3rd, 2020, and we all know what happened over the next few months. COVID was ravaging the world, and Black Lives Matter was ripping through the streets of major cities across the U.S. Joe Biden, in order to play and pander to the moment, announced that his vice president would be a Black woman, and that they were considering 4 at the time. And you all know what happened. Kamala Harris would be lifted out of the ashes of defeat by becoming the world's foremost DEI hire in the history of human existence. Now, you all know what's happened since then. Despite all of the lying and propaganda, our economy is in horrendous shape. The country is the least secure it's ever been. The world is at the brink of global conflict. Everything costs more, and everything concerning morality is even more degraded and perverse. This must be the focus of the Trump campaign and the conservatives and Republicans in power and leadership and media. Forget about Kamala's background. Forget about the fact that she got her start by sleeping with power and fame. Forget about her contradictory and hypocritical record as an AG and a prosecutor. Focus on the fact that she was the most radical member of Congress. The most radical. Focus on the fact that she's been second in command in one of the worst administrations of all time. And focus on the fact that a Harris presidency would only exaggerate the problems of today. The economy would get far worse. The country would only become less safe, more anarchistic. The world would become more unstable. Costs would only become higher and higher. Morality would disappear. And the division and animosity would only increase. Kamala is the multiplication of Biden's radical policies. She is, without question, the most radical leftist candidate the United States has ever had. Consider some of the most important issues of our time: the economy, immigration, abortion, crime and safety, and foreign policy. Kamala's economic policies are worse than Biden's because she would further gut the petroleum industry, which we've explained before, is the industry which single-handedly affects every other industry in America. The more you regulate and stifle the petroleum industry, the more the cost of everything is affected. Inflation rises, people bleed money and drain their savings accounts. That's what would happen under President Harris. She was the border czar. Regardless of what the media is saying today, she absolutely was the border czar, or the person that Biden placed in charge of the immigration crisis at the beginning of his term. She infamously trotted out there and said, "Don't come," and then 8 million illegal people came anyway. Which, by the way, she doesn't see as illegal. She sees them as a neighbor in need that we should simply give citizenship to and provide money and free health care to as well. She thinks they should vote. All that will destroy Medicare. It'll destroy Social Security. It will dilute our elections, and it will destroy and forever alter America as we know it. She had staunchly opposed any legislation against abortion. She calls abortion reproductive health rights, the most dehumanizing way to describe murdering an innocent and defenseless baby. She became a historic first, not only by being the first female vice president in American history, she was also the first sitting vice president to visit an abortion clinic. Mark my words, she will continue to kill any legislation bent on stopping baby killing, and she will work to make abortion an enshrined right in the United States. The trend of not punishing crime and releasing evildoers will only dramatically increase under Ms. Harris. She would be the first president to actually come after the firearms of American citizens. And no, it won't be a specified ban as we saw in the 90s. This would be like a search and seizure campaign, and they'll moralize it as much as possible. Violence will be exacerbated because the tension and division of racism will be stoked. White or Caucasian Americans will be increasingly discriminated against, and in total, every American will be less safe and secure in every way because of policy. But so will the rest of the world. Do you really think Kamala Harris will be tougher on Zelensky or Putin? Do you think she'll display the strength necessary to dissuade Xi Jinping from aggressive action? Do you think she'll support Israel's eradication of Hamas, or that she'll stand up to the Iranian terror regime? Of course not. The world will only become more violent and unstable because America's leadership is vapid and weak. That's 5 critical reasons to oppose this woman. And on that note, do not make this about gender or color. Do not let them make this about gender or color. Make the conversation about policy and her record as senator and VP. She sucks at her job, and she always has. All of the problems we have now would only multiply under her regime. More taxes, more inflation, more illegal immigration, more regulation, higher costs, lesser security, more global destabilization, and more tyrannical control. Now, here's the first huge hurdle Kamala faces. People are calling her Coup-Mala because she's just rounded up pledges from the majority of delegates without ever having received a single vote from the American people by means of a primary. And a lot of people are upset about this. And I just have to point out how undemocratic this is of the party which claims to defend democracy. So I just want everybody to notice that Donald Trump worked and fought through all of the court cases and political resistance and assassination attempts to earn every vote he got to become the nominee once again. Kamala Harris did not. Here's what Black Lives Matter, of all people and organizations, had to say about this attempted coup. The DNC refused to host debates during the primary, even though a vast majority of Democratic voters wanted them. This would have likely allowed America to see the decline of Joe Biden in 2023. The DNC changed the primary schedule and created rules that made it almost impossible for non-Biden candidates to appear on the ballot, effectively clearing the field of any challengers to the incumbent president. Following the primary, where millions of black voters weighed in, after one poor debate performance, the DNC party elites and billionaire donors bullied Joe Biden out of the race. Now, Democratic Party elites and billionaire donors are attempting to manipulate black voters by anointing Kamala Harris and an unknown vice president as the new Democratic ticket without a primary vote by the public. This blatant disregard for democratic principles is unacceptable. While the potential outcome of a Harris presidency may be historic, the process to achieve it must align with true democratic values. We have no idea where Kamala Harris stands on the issues, now that she has assumed Joe Biden's place, and we have no idea of the record of her potential vice president because we don't even know who it is yet. I know that's an unbelievable statement coming from a Marxist, anarchist, race-baiting organization, but that's where we're at, folks. I just bring this up to say this is definitely not over. And we'll see if Kamala makes it to the convention like this. But all of her known history and policy and this non-democratic fashion of rounding up delegates is definitely making a poor first impression with the American people. A Quinnipiac poll from this week found that if the election were held today, Trump wins. He's beating her by double digits with Gen Z voters and millennial voters and independent voters. Trump's favorability rating in that same poll is the highest it's ever been. And in that respect, he's beating Harris by double digits. But let's say she makes it through and becomes the nominee. She cannot unscramble the eggs of her radicalism. She's not going to change course on that. She can't, because Trump will be able to point to all of that history and record and contradiction. So she's not going to pick someone as her VP who would oppose her radical leftism. Here is the only strategy she has. Are you ready? Lying. All she can do is lie. Lie about the past and the present and mislead about the future. She's already doing it. She's going to continue coming after Donald Trump. She's going to lie about Trump's economic policies and lie about her own economic policies. She'll gaslight the American people to say that Trump's policies will impoverish Americans, but under her leadership, everyone will get rich quick. She'll lie about abortion, saying that Trump is going to completely get rid of baby killing and ban the abortion pill. She'll lie about the performance of the current administration. She'll lie about how great and amazing a president her boss is. She'll play identity politics and blame any opposition to her as sexist and racist. She will literally demonize Trump's whiteness, wealth, and masculinity. And I'm sorry, but this ain't gonna work. Trump's popularity and support only rises the more that he is assaulted. And you cannot distance yourself from reality. We all know the deal, and we're not gonna let you be unburdened by what has been. We, the people, must be prepared to describe and evidence the bleak future that a Harris administration would bring. Point to her performance and policy. Move the conversation away from the identity politics and the falsehood and Donald Trump. And to the members of Congress, I think it's time to impeach Kamala Harris. She's just as guilty for all the high crimes committed by the current regime. Now, I know that she would be acquitted in the Senate and she resides over the Senate, but in the least, this would stifle her campaign and magnify her horrible reputation, just as was the strategy with President Trump's impeachments, plural. Those were all a political and electoral ploy. Give the Democrats a taste of their own medicine and fight to win this election. Defeating this regime is necessary for America to become what it can be, unburdened by what has been. Well, that's going to do it for me. What'll it be next time? We'll see. For now, go and be the salt and light you were meant to be, and we'll see you next time on We the Free. Thanks for watching today. Listen, I want to make sure that you stay informed on the news and the biblical response to it. So, do yourself and us a favor and hit the subscribe button before you go. And then we would love for you to check out WeTheFreeShow.com to grab yourself some merch to help spread the word about We the Free. And we're also going to put a video on the screen that we think that you'll like right now. Now, go and be that salt and light, and we'll see you next time.